All right, good morning. We're sitting here Friday morning, Buddy Brew, with our Buddy Brew coffee, and I'm sitting with is it the president?
Yes, sir.
The president of the American Public. Well, I'm going to let you go ahead and tell us who we are.
Well, I'm Bill Millar. I'm the president of the American Public Transportation Association. We're based in Washington, D.C.
Uh-oh, you're from Washington.
Oh, I'm from Washington. I'm definitely here to help today.
Well, you know, there's a lot of issues that we're dealing with here locally regarding public transportation. In fact, as we sit here with our coffee, I'm looking at a Hart bus that's right across the street. And there's in fact, a very contentious debate taking place, which I think is healthy here in our community, about the validity of public transportation. Does it work? Is it cost effective? And I was hoping maybe you could address some of those points.
Oh, sure.
Why you do what you do and why public transportation is important.
Well, let me take a moment just to introduce my association just for a second or two.
Sure.
American Public Transportation Association, or APTA as we call it. You know, being from Washington, you got to have a good acronym, so ours is APTA. We represent the providers of public transportation, mostly in the U.S. and Canada, but from around the world, as well as the private companies that supply our industry. So organizations that build rail cars or buses or engineering planning firms. So it's a pretty broad range, a pretty broad mix.
Let me interrupt you for 1 second. I just heard public-private.
Exactly.
Private. Okay.
And that's where I was going next. Because
okay, go ahead.
It's kind of unusual. I mean, you hear about private associations or you hear about public associations. Ours is kind of rare. We bring them together. Anyhow, public transportation in America, whether we're talking about the local bus, the local streetcar, the subway, the ferry boat, the commuter rail line, the specialized services for persons with disabilities, that's all what we call public transportation. Today is a weekday, right? It's Friday, I think, if I looked at my calendar right this morning. 35 million times today, Americans will board a bus, board a rail car, do something on local public transit. So when people suggest that, gee, somehow public transit is kind of marginal or not that important, I have a lot of trouble with that, and so do those 35 million times that Americans will use it today. I think they would argue that point too. Now, one of the things we're seeing across the country, and part of the reason I'm in Tampa today, is that the way things were is not the way they're going to be. What do I mean by that? A lot of communities, they used to have streetcars, they used to have good local bus service, and then as we improved our highway system and changed our land use patterns, they thought, well, gee, we'll never really need public transit again, except maybe for people who can't drive or something like that. But what we're seeing, and I think we're seeing it here in Tampa, we're certainly seeing it in other parts of Florida, is that as cities like Tampa grow, as counties like Hillsborough grow, they not only need good roads. This is not about roads versus transit. We need both. So it's not just roads or just transit, but it is that combination to serve the broad needs of the community. And so the kind of debate you're having here in Hillsborough County, going on all over the country about what is that right mix? What is the right amount of roads? What's the right amount of transit? How should they be integrated? Is it time to invest in higher forms of transit like rail? You know, you don't build a freeway to your driveway. You build a local street. That local street feeds to an arterial. That arterial feeds to the freeway. Well, same thing in transit. For many communities, a bus was enough for a long time. But as the communities grow bigger, they grow more complex, they have different land use patterns that develop, well, maybe it's time to look at a light rail, or maybe it's time to look at something called Bus Rapid Transit, another acronym, BRT.
Right.
From what I understand here in Tampa, you're looking at all of the above. You've got a good basic bus system. In fact, I'm in Tampa today to give the local system, Hart, give them an award as the outstanding system in their size category, what we call a medium-sized system. So you've got a good basic system, and the question is, as you grow and develop over the next several decades, is what you have enough, or do you need to look at other things? And as I understand that, that's what's being put before the voters this November.
How do you answer a lot of folks will talk about the fact that, look, public transportation is a great idea, but either A, let a private company do it if it's going to be profitable, or that, B, it doesn't pay for itself. I hear that quite often.
Well, I don't know of any police departments that pay for themselves. I don't know of any fire departments, libraries, schools. It's a public service, to be sure, and it's a service that can be used by anyone in the public if they choose to use it. And you hear that kind of argument all the time, but it's just one of those basic services. It's like roads or like anything else. A civilized society has a variety of services. I don't use them all every day, but I'm sure glad they're there. And public transit, for many people, is that way. Also, here in Florida, you have, as I understand it, the highest percentage of elderly persons and older persons in America. That's a great thing. Enjoy your climate and all the good services you have for them. But if we're lucky, every one of us is going to get older. And I saw some interviews recently done by one of your local papers that was talking to some people that, frankly, about my age, about 62, and they said, I'm finding that as I get older, I never thought I would need to use the bus, but now I don't like to drive so much in the evening, and yet I still want to get out in the evening. So maybe I'll take the drive in the day, use the bus in the evening. You never know when you're going to need public transportation, even if you don't think you'll ever use it.
Well, our public transportation referendum involves roads. Over approximately $800 million is going to go towards road repair, and it will all be in the county. Buses, we're looking at expanding our current system, buying new buses, getting smaller systems. The flex system is circulators that will go out into the county. But the controversy revolves around the light rail. And one of the questions that we hear quite often is that, look, rail is fine for even New York and Chicago, but it will never work for a southern community such as Tampa. We've seen evidence in Phoenix and other Suncoast cities that it does work, but what's your experience with light rail in a community such as ours?
Well, again, remember, it's not about where your community is today, it's about where your community is going to be. And I assume this community is going to continue to grow and grow. The fastest growing use of light rail in America is in the Sun Belt and in the West. Cities that, frankly, gave up on their transit systems many decades ago, and then as they grew, they discovered they needed to bring them back. Phoenix is a good example. Charlotte, North Carolina is a great example where they have put their transit system and their development plans together so that they get the best out of both. First, they improved their bus system. Then they went and started a small trolley. Then they went ahead and did light rail. They have plans for commuter rail. As Charlotte and Mecklenburg County grow, they believe that's what's going to be necessary. Phoenix is a great story. They argued over that for many decades. Finally, they made the decision to go ahead. The voters approved the package of projects for them. And now it is one of the great success stories in terms of both their bus system and their light rail. So it is successful in the South. It can be successful. It's not the only thing you should do. You should definitely match up your transportation program with your economic development program, with your community development program. None of these operates in isolation. You shouldn't let your road system go down just because you're building light rail. You need good roads. You need good transit. It's part of a total package.
And then I guess let me ask you about the investment. One of the challenges that we've heard from folks is that it just costs too much money. Rail's way too expensive, and that all the systems that have been built have been enormous cost overruns. Can you address that issue of cost?
Well, cost is a very relative thing. We're able to see the cost because the accountants can tell us what something costs, but the benefits go on for centuries, literally, or certainly decades to be sure. When the first line of the New York City subway was opened in 1904, people were outraged. Those couple of miles cost $35 million. You can't do the planning studies today for $35 million, yet 106 years later, New York is still benefiting from that investment. So the costs are substantial, as they are with a freeway project, as they are with an airport, as they are with any form of infrastructure. And yet that infrastructure, to use that big word, is what forms the basis of the economy, the basis of the community going forward. So in terms of whether there'll be cost overruns, that depends how well you do your planning and how well you manage the project. There are certainly cities who have had some surprises and cost overruns, and there are projects that have come in on time and under budget. So it's a matter of managing it. It's like anything else. You have to know what you want, you have to manage it well, and you can keep those costs under control. Now, sometimes things happen or communities change their mind halfway through a project. Well, that's going to increase the cost. But if you're careful from the beginning, if you manage it well, there's no particular reason why the costs on this would be any riskier than the costs on any other project.
Any other project, including a road.
You got
Well, I like closing on this issue of management. I had an opportunity to fly out and meet John English,
Oh, yes.
who runs the system in Salt Lake, and Dave Armijo, who's here today, this morning, enjoying a cup of coffee, and his director of Heart, insisted that I meet a manager who always was on time or ahead of time and under cost. And one of the things that we really want to make clear here locally is that we're going to manage this like we would any other successful project. That we're going to be on time, we're going to be under cost, we're going to insist that we've got the very best people here working this project because we recognize we're using public money. And you know, I know the pressure is going to be on, but I think we're up to the task. And I'm just glad that we are able today to have you here and also to be celebrating. And I hate to use the word celebrate because we've just begun our work, but let's acknowledge that Hart has done a very good job of turning itself around. A public agency that's had some challenges, that is now being recognized as being one of the best mid-sized public transportation agencies in America, and they're going to get better, and we're going to be smarter and sharper and more focused so that we can provide the very best service to you. And I'm Mr. Millar. I just want to thank you for being here. I look forward to going to the awards ceremony in a few minutes, and hope you enjoy Tampa, Florida.
Well, thank you. It's great to be back, and good luck in your projects. And I think if you're following the Utah model, you'll have great success.
That's great to hear. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.